Hi ladies, so glad you could come here. Such a gorgeous day. I think this is great. We can all just sit here and chat about our experiences. This is basically a forum for the wives and spouses of prostate cancer survivors. This sort of gives everybody permission to talk about it. I think a lot of times people are afraid to ask questions, and I think, like I have found with my husband, that once he started talking to other guys, he found a lot of knowledge and he didn't feel alone. But you never think about how the wives, the spouses would feel. And everybody figures they're just in the background, but I think it's a good idea for, the ladies to get together and just talk about these things. I'm sure most people, 99% of people, know nothing about prostate cancer.
And because it's not talked about.
Yeah, it's not talked about, yeah.
It's always...
You can't ask a question if you don't know what to ask, because you don't know what it's about.
And you're totally overwhelmed.
Oh, for sure. First of all that's going through the head is cancer, prostate cancer.
And so you're dealing with what is this going to do to our lives?
Yeah.
It's all that unknown.
We're going to talk about how men and women maybe have different views of the cancer, treated differently. That's sort of a hard one to figure out.
Well, it is, because it would be like asking a man, how do you react if your wife has breast cancer and has to have her wife? Well, he would not be able to relate to that the same way a woman would. I mean,
That before you go there, sit down, write out your questions. And no question is stupid.
Exactly.
Ask it.
That's
even
a
the
good
little
point.
details that you think might sound foolish, ask it, because that's what you need to know in order to settle your own mind.
Yeah, because how often do you go somewhere and say, oh, this is kind of a stupid question, but like you said, no question is a stupid
everybody
question.
says, oh, I was going to ask that.
Yeah, exactly. And
I wondered the same
Good,
thing.
like when you first come in to see the doctor, is to
Yes.
tell him ahead of
yeah.
time, I have a number of questions
Yeah,
I need
so
to
they
ask
give you time.
Yeah.
That's right. So the doctor is prepared to sit down and answer,
Right.
hopefully.
Yeah.
And then if you, as the second person there, write down answers, because you may forget some
Oh,
of
for
them.
sure. Yeah, that's a very good idea. Yeah.
Even when Jim went for his surgery, nobody kind of gave us a heads up on what kind of stuff to have, for afterwards.
Yeah.
How are you going to know this stuff?
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem
Well,
fair.
did a nurse or anybody come in and show him how to look after his catheter?
You see, he was in Guelph, but no, they didn't have any home care. Him and his son-in-law went online, and the one thing they read was, it's probably not a good idea to have sex when you have a catheter in.
Oh, well, hello.
There's information that you need to know.
Okay, well, I was wondering about that myself.
Who wants it? They have a catheter in, But no, he said it was terrible.
Really?
Yeah.
And
Our
did you have...
experience was good. We had home care come in immediately, every day. The nurse was wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about families, like your kids? Did they, I know with our kids, they were all really, really supportive of Jim, but that's scary, for them.
It is.
Right?
Yeah.
When they get that news.
For sure it is, yeah.
And they wouldn't also have much information on it either.
I just have one thing that my husband thinks should be done something about, and that's that when he came to the hospital to have the catheter removed, they don't warn you, nobody warned you ahead of time how much you're going to leak afterwards.
Right.
And just to go from the hospital to the car, there's a lot of leaking.
Mm-hmm.
And he had talked to somebody ahead of time who had told him, don't just take that little pad that they give you. You take a diaper.
Yeah.
Because you're going to leak a lot.
Everything,
initially.
yeah.
So he went in prepared, but he feels like the nurse didn't prepare him, or the doctor didn't prepare him how much he was going to leak.
Because you have to think about it. It's been in for 2 weeks or so.
Yeah.
And that time your bladder loses some of its elasticity.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got this big open pathway after that Wienerhosen's been in for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And you leak for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so good idea. Yeah, because otherwise you walk out of there with this little mini pad, and
That's right.
like you said, you need a diaper.
Out a diaper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he felt like he was an old man because all of a sudden he couldn't be as active because when he tried to go hiking, like we did a lot of hiking and tenting and stuff like that, and he would dribble. He'd have the pads, and it was devastating to him. But that's improved. Like he hardly ever wears a pad except if I have him digging ditches or making more to the garden. But no, so that's not a concern anymore.
One of the real things that happened with Ed is that they told him he'd have the catheter for 2 weeks, and he ended up having a month because our urologist practices for 3 weeks and then goes to his home for a week, and with the way it worked out, he ended up having the catheter for a month. And initially he was coming along really well and would get out and like walk to the end of the driveway and back, but by the 3rd week the catheter was really irritating, and he could hardly move, and I saw him getting worse. And those 2 weeks were really, really hard. And he finally got it out, and the relief was immediate, once he got it out. Yeah. But it had really impaired his functioning. Sure. The next day he danced at a wedding.
Yeah, wow. It was just I think the movement of the catheter.
Yeah, he couldn't be irritated.
Yeah. It was a very scary, emotional time. I mean, we were expecting our first 2 grandchildren about 10 days after he got the news that he had cancer. So you're dealing with how do you deal with this yourself, deal with these new babies coming, and how do you tell these kids, that this is happening?
Yeah, the dad's got cancer.
Exactly. Right
that
when
cancer
they're expecting their first children. It was really, I think I had a lot of anger. I know I had a lot of anger. I really took it out on one of Jim's family members once because something happened that really upset me, and I phoned him and just totally, lost it and caused quite a bit of a rift. He wouldn't talk to me for a couple of years, and now we're talking, and the first time we spoke afterwards, I said to him, you did me a huge favor because you made me totally get out all that emotion and cry and scream. And I really needed to do that, but I couldn't do it to Jim. Yeah. Like I couldn't do it to him. Yeah. I had these 2 kids having babies. I couldn't do it to them, And so he was kind of the one there, and boy, he got it.
He got it. Oof,
but,
both barrels.
It was, it was good for me to get that out. There's so much emotion, and at the time, I think if a woman whose husband had gone through that had just come and talked to me, I think that would have been just one-on-one. I think that would have been amazing. And because that's actually what happened to me, because I was in St. Joe's having had knee surgery, and one of the women there came up to me and introduced herself and said, I hear Jim, she knows Jim and about his surgery, and she said, my husband had that. And we just started to talk, and it was amazing. And I told him that and said, nobody had sat with me and just talked to me about what I was feeling and going through and all those guilt and, what's going to happen and fear.
One of the hard things for me in this whole cancer experience was the decision making, because we usually make decisions together about things, and don't think anything about it. We each put our say in. But then now with the cancer, I was stopping and thinking, this is his body. Do I have a right to have input into what his decision is going to be about what's going to happen to his body? Whether he's going to have surgery or what's going to happen. And like for me, inside, and that's not something that I voiced to him either, but it was suddenly like stepping back and not being part of that easy decision making that we usually have.
One of the big questions that all couples with husbands with prostate cancer, it all boils down to sexuality. And I mean, you know, sometimes, it takes a while to be able to get back into having sex. Sometimes you never get there. Sometimes you try, it doesn't always work out, and sometimes it never works out. But there's still, you can still have intimacy without having sex. And I think this is a big thing. I think a lot of men, well, I'm speaking from my experience, not with a lot of men, but I mean with my husband. Let's rephrase that. With my husband, that I guess he feels that if he can't have sex, he feels let down, or he feels he's letting me down. And I don't know. How do you guys feel? Like sometimes it's a scary thing to try and do it, because not sure if it's going to work, kind of scared. He'll try and maybe he can't get an erection. So it's a lot of this stuff. And sometimes, I don't know, the intimacy sort of is a big issue. You can still have a lot of intimate feelings for your husband, even though you can't have sex, but you can try.
Well, and I think that was what was so frustrating to begin with, was because nobody talked to us about that.
Yeah.
Nobody said you can still have an orgasm.
Yeah.
I mean, you can. You know, and we kind of fumbled our own way through that.
Yeah.
Because certainly nobody was talking to us about it.
Yeah.
And so we did. I mean, we worked our way through it, and everything, it wasn't the same, but it certainly was satisfying.
And the doctor did explain that he would try and spare the nerves, because that's one of the big questions for all guys, and couples. Like, okay, how is this going to affect our sex life?
That's right.
Guys are used to having orgasms. They ejaculate.
Yeah.
And I say, well, honey, I have an orgasm, but I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, my fluids have decreased, and I call it a dry orgasm, but it's still there.
Right.
You still have those feelings, and he just couldn't understand that. How can you have an orgasm when you've got nothing comes out?
Right.
So
Yeah.
You don't have to have the fluid coming out.
I was thinking today, a relative of Jim's, an older uncle, had prostate cancer. And I remember when we went to visit him and his wife, they live in Dryden, and she was in her 80s, like they were in their 80s at the time, and she started to cry, and she said, "Will I catch it when we have sex?" And I thought, like nobody told her that.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's so sad.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, at that age, she's not going to ask anybody.
No, for
she's
sure.
She's not going to bring that up, especially in a small town.
Yeah.
And I felt so sorry for her, because I was thinking about things today, and I remembered that and thought, well, at least I knew that.